Kethover stared at the glowing screen in his dark office, reading the contract details for the third time. The numbers were impressive. More credits than he had seen in 5 years of brokering assassination deals. Enough money to buy a small moon or retire to one of those pleasure worlds where the sun never set. The target was simple enough. A species called humans from a planet named Earth. Some diplomatic team that was causing trouble for his clients. The Zephyrian Merchant Collective wanted them gone before next month's trade talks. Standard political assassination. Nothing unusual about that. He leaned back in his chair and activated his communication array. Time to find the right killers for the job. With this much money involved, he could afford the best. His first call went to Zexra, a Vorthak shadow dancer. The Vorthak were perfect for political hits. They could slip through any security system like smoke through a screen. Zexra had never failed a contract in 20 years. The alien scaled face appeared on his screen. Kethover, what do you need? High-paying job. Political targets. A species called humans. The client is offering... The screen went black. Zexra had cut the connection so fast that the communication system beeped in confusion. Kethover frowned. That was strange. Maybe the connection had failed. He tried calling back, but Zexra's system showed as permanently offline. He shook his head and moved to his next contact. Mordak the Precise, a quantum sniper from the Kepler system. These aliens could shoot through dimensional barriers and hit targets from different star systems. If anyone could handle a difficult job, it was Mordak. The sniper's thin gray face appeared on screen. His large black eyes showed no emotion, as always. Kethover, state your business. I have a contract. Species called humans. The payment is substantial. I need clean eliminations of diplomatic targets. Mordak's eyes widened. For a quantum sniper to show any emotion was alarming. The alien's voice came out as a whisper. Suicide. The screen went dark. Kethover sat back, confused. 2 of his best contacts had refused the job without even hearing the details. This had never happened before. Even the most dangerous contracts usually got someone interested, especially with this much money involved. He decided to try the hive mind executioners. They were expensive, but they never failed. A collective consciousness with thousands of bodies could handle any security system. They had once eliminated an entire planetary government in a single night. The main communication node accepted his call. The voice that answered was actually hundreds of voices speaking together, creating a strange harmony. Broker Kethover, we acknowledge your transmission. I have a high-value contract, multiple targets from a species called humans. The payment is... The harmonious voice broke apart into individual sounds of panic. Thousands of aliens chittering and clicking in fear. The sound was so disturbing that Kethover had to turn down his speakers. The transmission ended abruptly. Kethover stared at his communication array. 3 of the galaxy's most feared assassination groups had refused his contract. Not just refused, they had reacted with genuine terror. What was so special about humans?
He had never heard of them before.
Earth was not even marked on most star charts. It was somewhere in a quiet arm of the galaxy, far from major trade routes. How could such an unknown species frighten the best killers in the galaxy? Kethover activated his research terminal. His broker license gave him access to the guild's databases. He would find out what made these humans so dangerous. The search results were almost empty. A few trade records, some scientific surveys, nothing about military power or advanced weapons. Earth seemed like a typical developing world with primitive technology. But there was something strange. Every few years there were small notes in the guild's classified section. Notes about failed contracts. Notes about missing assassins. Notes about entire criminal organizations that had simply vanished. He dug deeper. The classified files required higher security clearance, but Kethover had been a broker for 15 years. He had earned access to most guild secrets. What he found made his blood run cold. There had been attempts to kill humans before. Not many, but enough to create a pattern. Every single attempt had ended in disaster, not just for the assassin, but for everyone involved. The brokers who arranged the contracts were dead. The clients who ordered the hits were dead. In some cases, their entire species had been wiped out. Kethover found a file marked Zarthok Incident, Maximum Security. Zarthok had been the guild's most successful assassin 30 years ago. A legend among killers. If there was anyone who could complete an impossible contract, it had been Zarthok. The file was heavily redacted, but the basic facts were clear. Zarthok had accepted a contract on a human diplomat. The human had died as planned. Clean kill, perfect execution. 6 months later, Zarthok was found floating in space, his ship destroyed. His clan had been eliminated. The broker who arranged the contract had disappeared. The client's homeworld had gone silent. Other humans had done this. Somehow, killing one human had triggered a response that destroyed everyone connected to the assassination. Kethavar read through more files. The pattern was always the same. Kill a human, and other humans would spend years tracking down everyone involved. They did not just want revenge. They wanted complete destruction of anyone who had threatened their species. But the strangest part was how thorough they were. The humans did not just kill their enemies. They studied them first. They learned about their families, their friends, their business partners. They dismantled entire networks of connections before making their final move. One file described the aftermath of an assassination attempt on a human trader. The assassin had been found dead in his locked apartment, apparently from natural causes. But everyone who had known about the contract also died within the year. Heart attacks, accidents, system failures, all perfectly explainable. But the pattern was impossible to ignore. The humans had somehow reached across the galaxy to eliminate dozens of beings, without leaving any proof of murder. Kethavar's hands were shaking as he closed the files. He understood now why the assassins had refused his contract. They were not just afraid of failing. They were afraid of being hunted by the most patient and thorough killers in the galaxy. But he had a problem. The Zephyrian merchants were expecting results. The contract had already been accepted. The advance payment had been transferred. In the assassination business, failing to deliver meant losing more than money. It meant losing reputation and connections. He stared at the contract details on his screen. The human names looked harmless enough. Ambassador Sarah Chen, Trade Negotiator David Park, Cultural Attaché Maria Santos. They were just diplomats trying to work out trade agreements. But according to the guild files, killing them would be the same as declaring war on all of humanity. Kethavar made a decision that went against every rule of the assassination business. Instead of finding a killer for the humans, he was going to contact them directly. Maybe he could find a way out of this contract without ending up like Zarthok. He activated his communication array and began searching for the human embassy's contact information. This was either the smartest or stupidest thing he had ever done. But after reading those files, he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy's assassins were right to be afraid. Kethavar spent 3 sleepless days reading through the guild's deepest archives. Each file he opened made the situation worse. The humans were not just dangerous. They were impossibly systematically thorough in their revenge. The case of the Corvan pirates was particularly disturbing. 20 years ago, a group of space pirates had captured a human cargo ship. Standard procedure: ransom the crew, sell the cargo, everyone goes home richer. Simple business. But one of the pirates had gotten drunk and killed a human crew member during the negotiations. Just one death. An accident, really. Within 2 years, the entire Corvan pirate brotherhood had been destroyed. Not by military action or law enforcement. By other humans who had infiltrated their organization, learned their secrets, and systematically dismantled their operations from the inside. The surviving pirates reported the same terrifying pattern. The humans had not attacked directly. Instead, they had studied the pirates for months. They learned about their families, their hideouts, their business partnerships. They identified every person who had ever helped the Brotherhood. Then they began their campaign. Pirate ships started having mysterious system failures during raids. Their weapons would malfunction at critical moments. Their navigation systems would send them into asteroid fields or neutron star radiation zones. Their communication networks were compromised, leading to confusion and friendly fire incidents. The pirates tried to adapt, but the humans always seemed to be one step ahead. Every move the Brotherhood made had been anticipated. Every safe house was already being watched. Every escape route had been quietly blocked. Within 18 months, the Corvan pirates were reduced from a 1,000-ship fleet to a handful of survivors hiding in the Outer Rim. The humans had not just defeated them, they had made them an example for every other criminal organization in the galaxy. But the most chilling detail was in the final report. When the last pirate leader finally surrendered to authorities, he had only one request. He wanted to know how the humans had learned so much about his organization. The investigating officer found the answer in the captured data files. The humans had been tracking the Corvan pirates for 5 years before the incident. They had detailed profiles on every member, complete records of their activities, and contingency plans for dealing with them. They had been ready for war before the war even started. Kethvar read through more cases, and the pattern was always the same. The humans maintained detailed intelligence networks that seemed impossible for such a young species. They knew about threats before those threats knew about them. The file on the Draconian trade war was even more disturbing. A consortium of Draconian merchants had tried to manipulate human trade routes by assassinating key negotiators. 3 humans had died in what looked like accidents over several months. The humans' response had been swift and devastating, but not in the way anyone expected. Instead of military retaliation, the humans had simply started competing in the same markets as the Draconians, but their competition was unnaturally effective. Human traders always seemed to know exactly what prices to offer. They understood the personal preferences of every major buyer. They could predict market fluctuations with impossible accuracy. Within a year, the Draconian consortium had lost 70% of their business to human competitors. Their trade empire, built over centuries, had collapsed in less than 12 months. The investigation revealed that the humans had somehow obtained complete records of Draconian trade negotiations going back 50 years. They had detailed psychological profiles of every major Draconian trader. They knew about personal debts, family relationships, and secret business deals that even other Draconians did not know about. But the most frightening part was how they had obtained this information. The evidence suggested that humans had been systematically infiltrating Draconian society for decades. Not as spies or soldiers, but as traders, technicians, and service workers. Invisible people who were present at every important meeting, but never considered significant enough to worry about. The Draconians had been unknowingly teaching their enemies how to destroy them for generations. Kethvar pushed back from his terminal, his hands trembling. The humans were not just patient killers. They were long-term strategists who thought in terms of decades or centuries. They prepared for conflicts that had not even started yet. He found one more file that made everything clear. The report was marked Theoretical Analysis, Human Social Networks. It had been written by a Zephyrian social scientist who had studied human behavior for 10 years. The analysis explained why killing humans was so dangerous. Most species had loyalty bonds that extended to family or close tribal groups. Humans had somehow developed loyalty networks that included their entire species, and even extended to other species they considered allies. Kill one human, and you were not just threatening an individual. You were attacking a network of billions of beings who would treat your action as a personal assault. Every human in the galaxy would consider it their responsibility to respond to the threat, but the response would not be immediate or obvious. Humans planned their revenge carefully. They studied their enemies completely. They waited for the perfect moment to strike back. And when they did strike, they did not just want to kill their enemies. They wanted to make sure that everyone in the galaxy understood what happened to those who threatened humans. The social scientist had interviewed several survivors of human revenge campaigns. They all reported the same psychological pattern. The humans did not torture their enemies physically. Instead, they created a sense of helplessness and inevitability. Their enemies would wake up, each day knowing that the humans were watching, waiting, planning. The psychological pressure was worse than any physical attack. Many victims had committed suicide rather than wait for the humans to make their final move. The report concluded with a recommendation that had been adopted by every major government in the galaxy. Under no circumstances should any action be taken against human interests without careful consideration of long-term consequences. The human response to threats is disproportionate, inevitable, and impossible to defend against. Kethvar closed the file and stared at the contract on his desk. The Zephyrian merchants who had hired him had no idea what they were asking for. They thought they were ordering simple assassinations. Instead, they had declared war on the most dangerous species in the galaxy. He looked at his communication array. He had found the contact information for the human embassy on Nexus Station. Ambassador Sarah Chen was listed as the primary diplomatic contact for the sector. According to the files he had read, she was exactly the kind of person who would coordinate a systematic response to threats against her species. Her background included military service, intelligence work, and diplomatic training. She was not just a negotiator, she was a strategist. Kethvar knew that contacting her directly was against every rule of the assassination business. Brokers were supposed to remain anonymous. They were supposed to maintain professional distance from all sides of a contract. But the alternative was worse. If he tried to complete this contract, he would end up like Zarthok. If he failed to deliver results, the Zephyrian merchants would destroy his reputation and probably kill him for taking their money. His only chance was to find a way to make this situation work for everyone involved. He activated his communication array and sent a message to Ambassador Chen, requesting a private meeting. He identified himself as a business consultant, dealing with a matter of mutual interest. Now he just had to hope that the humans were willing to negotiate instead of simply adding him to their list of targets. Kethvar met Ambassador Sarah Chen at a neutral trading station in the Vega system. He had chosen the location carefully, public enough to seem safe but private enough for sensitive conversation. He expected to find a heavily guarded diplomat surrounded by security teams. Instead, Ambassador Chen sat alone at a small table in the station's observation lounge, drinking coffee and reading reports on a tablet. She looked completely relaxed, as if assassination contracts were everyday business for her. She was smaller than he had expected. Most humans were similar in size to his own species, but Chen seemed almost fragile sitting there in her simple blue diplomatic uniform. She looked up as he approached, and her smile was warm and genuine. "Mr. Kethvar, thank you for meeting with me. Please sit down." He settled into the chair across from her, his forearms arranged carefully on the table. His species always showed all limbs during important negotiations, a sign of openness and honesty. "Ambassador Chen, I must tell you something important. There is a contract. We know about the contract." Her voice was calm, almost casual. "The Zephyrian Merchant Collective hired you to arrange our elimination before next month's trade negotiations. They offered quite a lot of money." Kethvar stared at her. "You know, we've known for 3 weeks." Chen touched her tablet and the screen changed to show surveillance footage. "This is from the Zephyrian boardroom where they made the decision to hire you." The video showed clearly recognizable Zephyrian merchants sitting around their private conference table. The audio was perfect quality. Every word of their conspiracy was recorded. "How did you get this?" Kethvar's voice was barely a whisper. "We have our sources." Chen's smile never wavered. "Would you like to see more?" "We have recordings of their private communications, financial records, personal schedules. We know which of their employees has gambling debts and which ones are unhappy with their working conditions." She touched the tablet again. New files appeared on the screen. Complete dossiers on every member of the merchant collective. Their families, their business partners, their personal habits. Information that should have taken years to gather. "This is impossible," Kethvar said. "The Zephyrians are paranoid about security. Their boardroom is supposed to be completely secure. Nothing is completely secure if you know how to look." Chen sipped her coffee. "We've been monitoring the Zephyrian collective for 2 years. Ever since they started manipulating trade routes to undercut human merchants." Kethvar felt cold fear spreading through his body. 2 years? But the assassination contract was only issued 3 weeks ago. "Yes, we knew they would eventually decide to try violence. The pattern is always the same. Economic competition leads to frustration. Frustration leads to desperation. Desperation leads to assassination attempts." Chen showed him another file. This one contained psychological profiles of each Zephyrian merchant, detailed analysis of their decision-making patterns, their personal weaknesses, their likely responses to various pressures. "We've been preparing for this conversation for months, Mr. Kethvar. We knew they would hire a broker. We knew the broker would research our species and discover the risks. We knew that any intelligent broker would eventually contact us directly. The implications hit him like a physical blow. You've been manipulating this entire situation. We prefer to think of it as providing guidance." Chen's expression remained pleasant. "The Zephyrians needed to learn an important lesson about the consequences of threatening humans. You needed to understand why the galaxy's assassins refuse contracts on our species. Everyone benefits from better information." Kethvar looked around the observation lounge. For the first time, he noticed that several other beings were sitting at nearby tables. They looked like ordinary travelers, but now he wondered if they were human agents. "Are we being watched?" "Constantly." Chen did not even glance around. but not just by humans. The Zephyrian merchants have had surveillance teams following you for the past week. They want to make sure you complete their contract. They also have a backup plan in case you fail. She showed him photos of armed Zephyrians at various locations around the station, professional killers from the look of their equipment. They plan to eliminate you after the job is finished, of course. Can't leave witnesses to their assassination plot. Standard criminal procedure. Kathavar felt sick. He had walked into a situation that was far more complex than he had realized. Multiple sides were playing games he did not understand. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Cooperation." Chen leaned forward slightly. "You see, Mr. Kathavar, we could have prevented this entire situation weeks ago. We could have exposed the Zephyrian plot, arrested their agents, disrupted their operations. Simple and clean. Why didn't you?" "Because simple solutions don't send the right message." Her tone became more serious. "Every few years, some group decides to test human resolve by targeting our people. They always think they're the first ones to try it. They always think they're cleverer than the previous groups." Chen touched her tablet again. This time, the screen showed a galactic map with dozens of marked locations. These are all the places where someone has tried to assassinate humans in the past 50 years. The results are always the same. Complete destruction of everyone involved. But the lesson never seems to stick. She zoomed in on several locations. Where thriving civilizations had once existed, there were now empty systems or primitive colonies struggling to survive. "We're tired of having to destroy entire civilizations to protect our people. It's expensive, it's time-consuming, and it creates long-term political problems. We've decided to try a more educational approach." Educational? The Zephyrian merchants are about to become an object lesson for the entire galaxy. Not through destruction, but through demonstration. We're going to show everyone exactly how helpless they are against human intelligence networks. Chen showed him detailed plans for the systematic dismantling of the Zephyrian merchant collective. Financial manipulation, market competition, social pressure, political isolation. A campaign designed to destroy their power and influence without killing anyone. It will take about 6 months to complete. By the time we're finished, the Zephyrian collective will be bankrupt and powerless. But they'll still be alive to tell everyone what happened to them. Kathavar studied the plans. They were incredibly detailed and showed deep understanding of Zephyrian society and psychology. The humans had found ways to pressure every important relationship and business connection the merchants had. "This is worse than assassination," he said. "Exactly. Death is quick and clean. This will be slow and public. Everyone in the galaxy will watch the Zephyrian merchants lose everything they've built over centuries. The lesson will be impossible to ignore." Chen closed the files and looked directly at him. "But we need your help to make it work properly." "My help?" "The assassination contract creates the perfect cover story. As long as the Zephyrians think their plan is moving forward, they won't suspect that we're dismantling their organization. We need you to maintain that illusion." "You want me to pretend to arrange our assassination?" "We want you to become our business partner." Chen's smile returned. "Think about it, Mr. Kathavar. You've spent years arranging contracts for killers who are afraid to target the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Wouldn't it be more profitable to work for that species instead?" She slid a data chip across the table. "This contains a job offer. Competitive salary, excellent benefits, and the opportunity to help educate the galaxy about human capabilities." Kathavar picked up the chip with one of his smaller hands. "What exactly would I be doing?" "Cultural consulting. When someone wants to target humans, you'll help us turn the situation into a teaching opportunity. Much more interesting than simple assassination brokerage, don't you think?" He looked at the chip, then at the surveillance footage still playing on her tablet. The Zephyrian merchants looked so confident in their boardroom, having no idea that their private conspiracy was being recorded by the species they planned to eliminate. "What happens to the assassins who refused my contract?" he asked. "Nothing. They made the smart choice. We have no quarrel with people who demonstrate wisdom." Chen finished her coffee. "But we'll remember that they understand our nature. That kind of intelligence is valuable in the right circumstances." Kathavar realized that this conversation was not a negotiation. It was a recruitment session. The humans had already decided how this situation would end. His only choice was whether to be part of their plan or become another cautionary tale. "I accept your offer," he said. "Excellent." Chen stood up and extended her hand. "Welcome to the team, Mr. Kathavar. Your first assignment begins immediately." Kethavar watched from the human embassy as the Zephyrian merchant collective's empire crumbled in real time. It had been 3 months since his meeting with Ambassador Chen, and the demonstration was more terrifying than anything he had seen in his criminal career. The humans had not killed anyone. That was the most disturbing part. Instead, they had systematically destroyed everything the Zephyrian merchants cared about. Their business empire, their social status, their political influence, their personal relationships, all of it was being dismantled with surgical precision. "Look at this," Ambassador Chen said, pointing to the financial tracking display. Their main trading subsidiary just lost another major contract. The buyer decided to go with a human competitor instead. Kethavar studied the data. How did the human company know exactly what price to bid? Simple intelligence work. We've been monitoring Zephyrian communications for months. We know what they're willing to pay for everything before they even start negotiations. The screen showed dozens of similar transactions. Every time the Zephyrians tried to make a business deal, human competitors appeared with better offers. Not just slightly better, perfectly calculated to be irresistible to the buyers. But how do you have so many companies ready to compete with them? Chen smiled. We don't. Most of our competitors are actually Zephyrian companies that don't know they're working for us now. She showed him the organizational charts. Over the past 2 months, humans had quietly bought controlling interests in 17 companies that did business with the merchant collective. The Zephyrians were now competing against their own partners without knowing it. This is insane, Kethavar muttered. How did you acquire so many businesses so quickly? Preparation and patience. We identified key companies in the Zephyrian trade network 2 years ago. We've been building relationships with their executives, learning about their financial problems, positioning ourselves as helpful partners. Chen pulled up another file showing detailed psychological profiles of dozens of business leaders. Korthak Industries was struggling with debt problems. We provided favorable loans. Vaxian Trade Solutions needed new technology licenses. We offered excellent terms. Meridian Shipping wanted to expand into human space. We facilitated those connections. And now they work for you. They work with us. Much more pleasant than working against us. Chen's expression became more serious. The Zephyrian merchants made a critical error. They assumed that humans think like they do. Short-term profits, immediate solutions, simple revenge. She showed him a timeline of human activities in Zephyrian space going back 5 years. We think in decades, Mr. Kethavar. When the Zephyrians started manipulating our trade routes 2 years ago, we didn't respond immediately. We studied them. We learned their methods. We identified their weaknesses. We built the infrastructure necessary to defeat them completely. The timeline was incredible. Humans had been placing agents, building relationships and gathering intelligence throughout Zephyrian space for years, before the first trade dispute had even occurred. You were preparing for war before there was a war. We were preparing for the inevitable conflict. Species like the Zephyrians always escalate economic competition into violence. The pattern is predictable. Chen activated another display showing the personal lives of the merchant collective's leadership. Their families were experiencing financial problems. Their social connections were being severed one by one. Their political allies were distancing themselves. This is the part they find most disturbing, Chen explained. They expected humans to be angry and violent. Instead, we're being helpful and friendly. She showed him recordings of recent interactions between human agents and Zephyrian citizens. The humans were offering jobs to unemployed Zephyrians, providing financial assistance to those in need, creating business opportunities for struggling entrepreneurs. Their own people are starting to prefer working with humans rather than their traditional leaders. The merchant collective is becoming irrelevant in their own society. Kethavar watched a video of a human aid worker helping Zephyrian families who had lost their jobs when one of the merchant collective's companies had failed. The humans were not just destroying their enemies, they were replacing them. How long have you been planning this? The current operation? About 18 months. But the general strategy has been in development for much longer. Chen pulled up a document marked Long-Term Cultural Integration Protocols. We learned from our early conflicts that simply destroying our enemies creates power vacuums and instability. It's more effective to gradually replace hostile leadership with friendly alternatives. The document outlined a systematic approach for dealing with species that threatened human interests. Economic pressure, social manipulation, political infiltration, cultural influence. A toolkit for conquest that never involved direct violence. This is how you destroyed the Corvin pirates and the others. Partially, some situations require more direct responses, but we prefer methods that leave our former enemies grateful for human intervention rather than resentful. About human domination. Chen showed him surveys of public opinion in systems where humans had previously dealt with hostile governments. The results were consistent. Populations that had initially supported anti-human leadership now overwhelmingly preferred human presence. But the Zephyrian merchants don't seem grateful, Keithavar observed. They seem terrified. That's because they understand what's happening to them. Their citizens don't realize this is a coordinated campaign. They just see helpful humans providing better opportunities than their traditional leaders. The ambassador pulled up intelligence reports from inside the merchant collective. The leadership was becoming increasingly paranoid and desperate. They suspected human involvement in their problems, but they could not prove it. Every disaster that befell them looked like natural business failure or political coincidence. They know they're losing everything, but they can't explain how or why. That's the psychological pressure we want them to experience. Keithvar studied the reports. The merchant collective's leaders were showing signs of severe stress. Several had developed health problems. Others were making increasingly irrational decisions that only accelerated their decline. They're going insane. They're learning helplessness. It's an important psychological state for our enemies to experience. Chen's tone was clinical, almost scientific. They need to understand that human capabilities extend beyond their ability to comprehend or counter. She showed him projections for the next 3 months. The merchant collective would lose their remaining political influence. Their core businesses would fail, and their social status would collapse completely. By the end of the demonstration, they'll be powerless but alive, perfect witnesses to spread the word about what happens when you threaten human interests. And their assassination contract? Chen laughed. They canceled it 6 weeks ago. They can't afford to pay assassins when they're struggling to pay for basic business operations. She showed him the communication where the Zephyrians had desperately tried to cancel their contract with Keithvar. They had offered to pay cancellation fees, forfeit their advance payment, and provide additional compensation for the inconvenience. They're so focused on their business failures that they've forgotten why they wanted us dead in the first place. The trade negotiations they were worried about have become irrelevant. They no longer have the influence to affect trade policy. Keithvar realized the elegant completeness of the human strategy. They had not just defeated their enemies, they had made the original conflict meaningless. What happens next? Phase 2. Chen activated a new set of displays. Now that the Zephyrian demonstration is nearly complete, we begin the education campaign. The screen showed communication networks spanning the galaxy. News outlets, academic institutions, diplomatic channels, trade organizations, all of them would soon receive detailed reports about the Zephyrian merchant collective's decline. We're going to make sure everyone understands exactly what happened and why. The story will be told by independent journalists, respected academics, and neutral observers. All of them will reach the same conclusion, which is that threatening humans is pointless because humans are too well informed, too well connected, and too patient to be defeated by conventional methods. Chen smiled, and that cooperation with humans is much more profitable than competition. Keithvar looked at the galactic communication networks. The humans were about to spread their message to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. This isn't just about the Zephyrians. No. This is about establishing a new understanding throughout the galaxy. We want everyone to know that assassination contracts on humans are not just dangerous. They're completely unnecessary. Chen showed him the final part of their strategy. Offers of partnership and cooperation that would be extended to every major civilization in the galaxy. Trade deals, technology sharing, cultural exchanges, mutual defense agreements. We'd rather have allies than enemies, Mr. Keithvar, but we'll settle for enemies who are too intelligent to threaten us. 6 months later, Keithvar stood before a gathering of guild brokers on Terminus Station, delivering what had become known as the Human Lecture. The presentation hall was packed with assassination professionals from across the galaxy, all wanting to understand why their most dangerous profession had learned to fear one particular species. The Zephyrian Merchant Collective still exists, he told his audience, clicking to a slide showing recent footage from their homeworld. All 17 members of their leadership council are alive and healthy. Their families are safe. Their properties remain intact. He paused, letting that information sink in before continuing. However, they now work as maintenance supervisors on remote mining platforms. Their vast trading empire has been redistributed among their former employees and business partners. Their political influence has evaporated completely. They have become living monuments to the futility of threatening human interests. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Everyone in the room had heard stories about what happened to beings who accepted contracts on humans. But seeing the evidence was different from hearing rumors. The important lesson, Keithfar continued, is not what the humans did to the Zephyrians. The important lesson is how they did it. He showed them the timeline of human activities, the years of preparation, the careful intelligence gathering, the patient infiltration of Zephyrian society. By the time the Zephyrians decided to issue an assassination contract, the humans had already won the war. The merchants just didn't know it yet. A Vorthak broker in the front row raised one of her scaled hands. But how do humans maintain such extensive intelligence networks? Their species is relatively young and their technology is not particularly advanced. Kethvar had wondered about this himself until Ambassador Chen had explained it to him. Humans don't think of intelligence gathering as a military activity. They think of it as social interaction. Every human who travels, trades, or works in alien space is unconsciously collecting information about the societies they encounter. He showed them examples from his own research. Human traders who filed detailed reports about local political tensions with their companies. Human technicians who observed security procedures at their work sites. Human tourists who documented cultural practices and social hierarchies during their vacations. They don't have professional spy networks because they don't need them. Their entire species functions as an intelligence gathering system. Another broker spoke up, but that still doesn't explain their ability to coordinate responses across such vast distances. This was the part that had taken Kethvar the longest to understand. Humans have something that most species lack, a collective memory that spans generations and crosses political boundaries. When you threaten one human, you're not just threatening an individual. You're threatening a story that becomes part of their species' permanent record. He showed them examples of human historical documents, news reports, and cultural narratives. Every conflict involving humans was carefully recorded, analyzed, and shared throughout their society. They learn from every attack against their people. They study every enemy's methods. They develop countermeasures for threats that haven't even appeared yet. A quantum sniper broker transmitted a question through the hall's communication system. What about their emotional responses? Don't they feel anger or desire for revenge like other species? Kethvar had asked Ambassador Chen the same question. They do feel those emotions, but they've learned to channel them into long-term strategic thinking rather than immediate retaliation. They use their anger as fuel for patience. He showed them psychological profiles of humans who had lost family members to alien attacks. Instead of seeking quick revenge, these humans had dedicated years of their lives to understanding their enemies and developing comprehensive responses. They don't just want to kill the beings who hurt them. They want to make sure no human is ever hurt in the same way again. That requires changing entire civilizations, not just eliminating individuals. The presentation moved to its conclusion with footage from across the galaxy. News reports, academic studies, government announcements, all of them discussing the same topic, the new understanding of human capabilities and the wisdom of maintaining friendly relations with Earth. The Zephyrian demonstration has achieved its intended goal, Kethvar explained. Every major government in the galaxy now has policies prohibiting hostile actions against human interests. The academic community has published extensive research on human social psychology and strategic thinking. The media regularly broadcasts reminders about the consequences of threatening human citizens. He clicked to his final slide, which showed the current status of assassination contracts in the Guild database. In the past 6 months, we have received 0 requests for contracts targeting humans, not because humans have become harder to kill, but because potential clients now understand that assassination attempts are counterproductive. What about revenge contracts? Asked a broker from the back of the hall. Surely some beings still want humans dead for personal reasons. Kethvar smiled. This question came up at every presentation. We have received 3 such requests. In each case, I was able to arrange a meeting between the client and human diplomatic representatives. All 3 clients withdrew their contracts after those meetings. He showed them recordings from one such meeting. A draconian merchant whose business had been destroyed by human competition was initially furious and demanded blood revenge. After 2 hours of conversation with Ambassador Chen, he had agreed to accept a position managing human trade operations in his sector. The humans offered him more money, better working conditions, and the opportunity to rebuild his reputation. Revenge became irrelevant when cooperation became profitable. The presentation ended with Kethvar's new position description. He was now officially listed as a cultural liaison and conflict prevention specialist, working for the Human Diplomatic Corps. My job is to identify potential conflicts before they escalate into violence. When someone wants to hire assassins to solve a problem with humans, I arrange alternative solutions that benefit everyone involved. After the formal presentation, brokers approached him with specific questions. Most wanted to know if humans were hiring for other positions. Some asked about opportunities to work with human intelligence networks. A few inquired about the possibility of exclusive contracts for non-human assassination work. Zexra, the Vorthak shadow dancer who had originally refused his contract, waited until the others had left before approaching him. Kethvar, I must ask, do you truly believe the humans are as benevolent as your presentation suggests? It was a good question. Kethvar had spent months working closely with human operatives, and he had seen sides of their nature that they didn't show to most aliens. I believe they are as pragmatic as my presentation suggests. They have learned that cooperation is more efficient than conquest, and that education is more effective than elimination. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But I have also seen what they do to beings who cannot be educated or convinced to cooperate. The Zephyrians were fortunate that they were intelligent enough to recognize their defeat. Other species have not been so wise. Zexra's scales rippled with understanding. And that is why we refused your original contract. That is why every assassin in the galaxy refuses contracts on humans. Not because the job is impossible, but because success would guarantee a response that makes the original problem seem trivial. As the station rotated toward its artificial night cycle, Kethvar returned to his new office in the Human Embassy section. His desk was covered with reports from across the galaxy, potential conflicts that could be resolved through negotiation rather than violence. Ambassador. Chen stopped by as he was reviewing the day's files. How did the presentation go? Very well. I think we've convinced another generation of brokers that assassination contracts are bad business. Excellent. Chen sat down across from his desk. Ready for your next assignment? She handed him a file marked Potential Situation, Andromedan Separatist, Movement. The preliminary report suggested that a group of militant aliens was planning attacks on human colonies in the Outer Rim. Same approach as the Zephyrians? Kethvar asked. Similar strategy, different tactics. The Andromedans respond to demonstrations of strength rather than economic pressure. We'll need to show them that attacking humans is militarily pointless before they actually try it. Kethvar opened the file and began reading. Another potential conflict that would be resolved before it began. Another group that would learn to cooperate instead of compete. Do you ever wonder what the galaxy would be like if other species thought the way humans do? Ambassador Chen smiled. Probably much more peaceful, but also much more boring. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. By the way, we received another resignation letter from the guild today. Another broker who wants to transition to conflict prevention work. Your presentations are becoming quite influential. After she left, Kethvar looked out the viewport at the stars beyond Terminus Station. Somewhere out there, potential enemies were making plans that would eventually bring them into conflict with human interests. But now those conflicts would be resolved through negotiation and education rather than